All right. First off, Eva, thank you so much for your leadership and continued contribution in so many ways to this profession and to so many employers. Really hope to see you in DC on April 25th. First off, folks, I just want to let you know that at your tables, I believe there is a little brochure that talks about our conference. So our conference actually is here next year, March 20th through 23rd. So Michael Killingsworth is always the first one to sign up from Shell. If anyone can beat him, there's a special prize. And we'll make sure you get Eric, something like that, a pen? Something like that, all right. And next, the other thing I wanted to mention is, as you all know, Best Buddies is very near and dear to our hearts. And signing out an eval sheet is never fun. So the incentive is, for every completed eval we get on the conference, we give $20 to Best Buddies. So let's really break i4cp over that, all right? So here, I made the decision in the back of the room there that I am going to decrease my talk, yes, to 15 minutes. Why? Because, damn it, I wanted to. That's why. And we can all enjoy the sunshine. So here's the thing. On April 7th, I would really encourage those of you on your teams, what I'm going to share here is just going to be a very brief snippet of just some of the thoughts and ideas that surfaced, at least in my small little mind, over the past couple of days. And on April 7th, we're going to have an hour-long webinar where we're going to get in a lot more detail. So hopefully you all find that advantageous, as well as your teams as well. So please mark that down. All right, so key themes. Now these by no means are all inclusive here, but these are the ones that really stood out to me when I was kind of reviewing my notes last night. And one of the things that we don't plan for that. Well, you plan around the theme and you plan around your speakers, but you can't control what's coming out of their mouths, right? But it's very, very clear that the high-performance organizations are absolutely following the trends. They're getting out there to look at what the trends are. They're trying to filter out the noise to find out where the fuel is for their business, and they're getting ahead of that. And so much of that gels with our research around environmental scanning, scenario planning, et cetera, and that hit us square on the face. The alignment around key stakeholders was really hit on the head by Jack in the Box, right? The CEO, CFO, CHRO. But what was also beautiful about their discussion was it went well beyond their triumvirate. It went into their key stakeholders. And that's, again, very consistent with what we're seeing across our research. I put this down here because this bothers me. This is a theme that's nothing new, but it seems like there's little progress being made. There's a few companies that are really doing it great, and we were happy to and very fortunate to feature Intel and Apple. But a lot of companies struggle with turning data into solid information. And just from my opinion, I feel like people tend to make it a little bit too complex. And they should find a couple key measures, focus on those, and start from there. Companies with a purpose. You know, it's funny, you know, oftentimes in the HR field, you try to stay away from anything that sounds warm and fuzzy. But this is, there's empirical data that talks about, and the generations are demanding more of a purpose-driven work environment, and we're absolutely seeing that highlighted here. I can't stress this one enough, and I mentioned it earlier, and I'll explain, or I'll share an idea around that later. And then the making it safe to take risks, right, and celebrating failure. And so that seemed to be very, very high on the minds of many. And then the whole diversity and inclusion piece. And I heard someone mention something the other day that inclusion is making diversity into a competitive advantage, right? And I think that's spot on. And so what is your business doing to provide a more inclusive environment, to develop leaders who are more open to ideas, or more aware, self-aware of the power of diverse perspective and backgrounds, and how do they leverage that to really drive competitive advantage? You know, we started with John talking about something that's nothing new to any of us here, right? But it's how do we lead the work? It's going to come from all kinds of places. Oh, by the way, we had fun with social media. For those of you who are Twitterites or are just getting started, I'm going to give you a couple shout outs here because we had a pretty good Twitter feed going on. And it's not just about jobs, it's about the work, right? The deconstruction of that was discussed. But we also talked about, IBM Watson and driving more analytics into that conversation. And I can't help but reflect on this image right here of, look at the guy on the left. This little weenie up here, he won all those Jeopardy things in a row. And that may not be the most D&I thing to say, frankly. I'm really sorry about that. But that guy was the champ, and now I just love it because he's so upset that computer's beating him. I love that. But imagine what that looks like in your corporate executive team meetings, right? Where we were talking, I think John challenged and said, imagine having that machine-based knowledge right there, challenging the conventional wisdom coming out of the smartest minds in the room. Wow, how does that change the discussion? And then it's about communicating and defining what's in it for them, right? And I thought, when Jim Duffy and Cindy Ballard were up on the stage with John and with Kevin Oakes, I think they really brought it in as to what the challenges are. Jim said these ideas are way ahead of infrastructure right now. We've got to just start planning out the policies and the procedures, let alone the systems to make this happen. But at least, you got to start planning because this is certainly where things are going. And then Cindy was talking about, and explaining the whole potential movement to finding different talent pools that may not be employees of the company. We've got to put our egos aside, but it's important for us to really explain to people where we're going and what the benefits are. Because it's not about just displacing people from work. It's not that. It's about being able to make better decisions, about having greater capability, greater capacity. When we had the total rewards board up here, I think Michelle and Mark really brought it into some practical ideas. And I went out and I was following just on the Twitter feed from REI, because Michelle had mentioned about like yay days, right? Look at the point in the middle, BU leaders, you got to make things very relevant. You don't want to have esoteric designs and concepts. So Michelle brought up REI and the cost of living adjustments versus the $15 an hour minimum wage discussion. So that helped bring things into perspective with all their key stakeholders versus just saying, hey, we're giving everyone $15 an hour. It's what are the implications? What does that mean for the people who are already been here for a while making $16, right? So thinking more universally. But one of the things that she said too is when we give a Yay Day, one of the awards out, we ask people to post something on the social media as to what they did with that day. What a neat way to show people what they're using that information for and get other employees, not only employees, but people who are prospective employees really jazzed and excited about being part of REI. What a cool company culture. Now we move on to Jack in the Box, and Linda up here summed it up. The purpose drives engagement, and it was such a strong discussion around alignment. But one of the things that I thought would be beneficial to share, Mark Blankenship was talking about how they use an ACE model to really not just look at engagement, but they look at capabilities as well. And what does that look like? How does that, what does that look like from an analytical standpoint? Well, Mark shared with us once before, and some of you may not have seen this, so I thought I'd share it with you. This is actually part of a dashboard that he would be looking at. And so basically, he's able to look at the alignment, capabilities, and engagement across the company, red, yellow, green, green meaning good, yellow meaning neutral, red meaning warning, across different divisions, and then across different units. And they're able to look at that and dissect that and say, wow, you know what? Strong engagement over here, strong capabilities, average alignment. That unit 2 is probably performing really well right here. But look at that's unit 2 in the West. But look at unit 2 down below the company. They're really suck and win. What's going on there? Versus the other stores, and how can we narrow in and really provide and prescribe information to help them get ahead? Hopefully that's helpful because this certainly is driving business value at Jack in the Box. So those are just some of the numbers that you saw. But you know, certainly when you have that type of analytics, for them to be able to go to the store, region, or company level and say, your engagement's low, but your capabilities are up. There's a little bit of a misalignment here. Here's what we would suggest you go for, and here's what would result. All right, who can tell me what this means? What's? Yes, excellent job. All right, because I was just 3M didn't invent that, but they certainly say that. Exactly, there's a winner. You get a napkin or something that we may have for you up here. Excellent job. All right, and you know what I loved? Christy up here on Twitter really nailed it down. People innovate, not companies. And that just really gets me thinking about, you know, the research that we did, and I referenced it earlier, around the human capital practices that drive innovation. One of the things that we were reminded of looking back at that research is we looked at 8 different kinds of innovation, from business model to business process to breakthrough to incremental and human capital innovation. And what we found is that human capital innovation had a strong correlation to the other 7 types of innovation. So I ask you again, where does HR fit into the innovation equation at your companies? All right, who took part in the Best Buddies Walk? Awesome. Yeah, thank you, everyone. And I was going to bust out in the Best Buddies cheer, but I'm not going to. And instead, I am going to narrow in, though, because there's one of the photos of the teams, and when we look a little closer, who's that guy up there? There were all kinds of people coming out, you know, being part of the walk. And I just want to thank Jack and all of his friends. Excellent stuff. All right. Who's making HR sexy? Yeah, Pat is, with the HR hackathon, the perk up, okay? You know who else I think is making HR sexy? This guy. Who thinks so? Yeah, I'm telling you why, all right? Joe may not have had the flamboyance, but there's a lot to be said about getting the basics done right and reinforcing it and measuring it and knowing what you're measuring and following through with it. And my takeaway from making HR sexy was there's a lot of fun, crazy things that we should be trying. And, you know, don't chase all the trends, right? Filter through. Try something different. But if you don't have the basics down, and think again back to that whole component of data into information. If we can't agree to what the measures are, what data we need, how, you know, an agreement between line of business, and nail that down, then if you're chasing shiny objects, I think you're going to end up missing a few things. So I just wanted to share that I think Joe is making HR sexy again. Yeah, yeah. And you know who else is? Miss Matzabal. And Elliot does always a great job of bringing things, you know, of challenging us of what we're thinking of where learning's going, right? And, you know, we're no longer creators of content, we're curators, right? We've been seeing that. Kevin Oakes has been saying that for a while, and all the research we do with ATD, you know, it's employee-led, right? What are you doing to enable people to get content out there, to share information, to share knowledge? And then look at what Karen's talking about, you know, and Melissa Daimler at Twitter. You know, there was a lot of information going on back and forth on the tweet feed. For those of you who are just new to Twitter, I'd encourage you, follow the hashtag of i4cp, pound i4cp 2016. You'll get a great summary of the conversations that were going on behind the scenes. You know, Rob talking about collaborative overload, and again, we've got, I can't wait for the research study. Several of you are going to be on that research advisory council for that report. If any of you are interested, please just let me know, send me an email. But you know, the data that Rob was sharing from the overload standpoint really is eye-opening. But to me, the middle one really just hit it home. It's how formal networks, right, formal corporate structures are completely in contrast to where the informal power networks really lie, right? So what are your organizations doing to enable the information flow when that's the reality at hand? And one of the things that I wanted to, Rob's question was, what can leaders do to ensure more decentralized knowledge flow? This is from our organizational agility research, but we had 6 key talent practices that enable a real agile organization. Practice 2 is decentralized structure to enable information flow. Companies like W.L. Gore, FedEx Ground have adopted a lattice-style structure. W.L. Gore has 10,000 employees. Every single one of them can connect with another one of those employees based upon knowledge, needs, and expertise. And that's allowing the information exchange instead of the silos, right? We all saw that when we broke into those groups. And then one of the other practices, and this seems so basic, but it's used very effectively, is empowering people at the lowest level to make the decisions that are right at that particular level. Do they know what those decisions are? Do they know they can make them without repercussion? And that allows instead of going through the channels and the bureaucracy of trying to get someone to say check, et cetera. Okay, simple practices that make a big, big difference. I loved Cheryl Connolly's presentation because it really helps us look ahead, right? And how many of you get a chance to stick your head up out of the ground and not be an ostrich for a day and actually see some of this stuff? Not many, because you're just flooded with the stuff you need to be working on. But a few things stood out to me, embrace the future. Let's take advantage of it. What's happening? What are the implications back to our business? Stay in touch with these socio, political, economic megatrends that are going on out there. But always be plausible. Be provocative, but be plausible, okay? Don't go out there with this outlandish statistic that just, cuts at your credibility. And I think that balance is very, very important. I love this quote because this really speaks to one of the things we're going to get to in just a minute. Millennials, they don't understand the people that have been around for 20 years, maybe even 10 years in a company anymore, right? And this one right here, 18-year-olds in 10 years will change jobs 6 times. That's unbelievable. That job hopper used to be, have a massive negative connotation to that person before. This is normal quote. So what can you do about that? I submit to you it's diverse developmental experiences, damn it. That's what's going to be part of it. And so I think that's so critical for us to be looking at, career pathing, career planning. Change the mindset, change the way you're looking at that, and look more at experiential mapping. And then code. Enough said. I think we all, I'm just speaking to myself personally. I learned a ton watching that. And I think that we can all personally reflect on that. All right, conference webinar. There'll be a lot more. There was a lot more at the conference. That was my attempt with 46 seconds left to give you a little snippet of what was going through my mind. I also want to mention that we hope you sign up for 2017. Melissa Daimler from Twitter, Joe Garbus from Celgene, Melissa summed it up. I think it's fantastic. Part of i4cp is this wonderful network, and I hope you really made tremendous career, if not lifelong contacts here. But I wanted to share this too, and Gail Halsey told us this at dinner last night, that in one-hour conversation she had with a few of her colleagues, or not colleagues, but peers here at this conference, she was able to avoid $1 million, what she would have termed a mistake decision at her firm. And so thank you, Gail, if you're in here, because I'm using that to promote our conference. So this thing pays off. So sign up, reap the rewards, and make your companies more successful. Thank you very much. Fill out your evals, and we'll see you next year. Cheers and safe travels.